Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerskis Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerskis Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago, your home for all things Chicago sports. This is your host, Sean. And before we start, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. So looking for family fun during the 4-day Christmas weekend? Check out the Ice Hogs at the BMO, Friday, December 26th versus the Iowa Wild. Puck drops at 7 p.m. If you're a fan 21 years and over, come early when the Blues Flame Lounge opens at 5:15 for a pregame party. Fun for all ages. Check out info at icehogs.com for tickets and more. Also, in case you're new to the show, or just as a refresher to those of you that do listen, is you can always check us out at swerskisports.com. That's SWERSKI sports.com. Or subscribe to this podcast via iTunes, Stitcher, however you listen to your podcasts. But make sure you subscribe, because then you'll get all this goodness sent directly to you every single week for absolutely free. So just subscribe, and if you really want to show some love, all you have to do is hit the review, give us 5 stars, leave a comment, leave some feedback. We love that. It makes us get boosted in the ratings higher, and then people can find us. We can do more shows. We can get cooler guests. Also, if you would like, you can also follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Swerski Sports, or on Twitter at Swerski Sports. So let's jump into the Chicago Bears. That's really all I can say about this. Is I don't even know where to begin anymore. I feel a bit schizophrenic. I've gone back and listened to what I've said in previous episodes, and a lot of it doesn't make sense anymore after seeing them play another game. The issue is that this team has talent. And I know a lot of people are saying there's no talent. I listen to other radio shows. I listen to the fans calling in. And this team has talent. You can't tell me they don't. What they don't have is good coaching. They don't have discipline. And they're lacking in continuity and the ability to have any sort of leadership. That's what they're missing. We have another abysmal showing by the Bears against the Dallas Cowboys. They got beat on all 3 phases. Some of this is the fact that Dallas went in there with a game plan that they knew they wanted to go and pound the Bears on the ground with running the ball. And they went in there and did that. They only threw when they wanted to change up a little bit, and they just continued to pound the ball on the ground, and they did it successfully. If you can even make this worse of how bad they got beaten all 3 phases of the game, you get the situation of finding out Lance Briggs is out for the year, and Brandon Marshall gets hurt, and he's done for the year. And which is my deepest condolences go out to Brandon Marshall, because that was a brutal hit. And I'm not going to go as far as saying it's dirty, but that was a brutal hit, and I feel really bad that what happened to him. If you don't know, or you're not paying attention, he took a knee in the back below where the shoulder pads go. If you've never worn shoulder pads, basically you have the padding on the shoulder, but you also have this hard plastic chest plate and a plate that goes down the part of your back as well. But with any kind of other equipment, is you have different sizes and degrees of bulkiness that go with them. So with the shoulder pads, is you can get these big bulky shoulder pads, but a lot of wide receivers don't like that. They like these smaller ones that allow them more mobility, so you can do like an Odell Beckham type one-handed catch, or a Brandon Marshall against San Francisco type one-handed catch. those types of things you can't do with those big offensive lineman pads that those guys wear. So anyway, he takes this knee and goes right into his back. Apparently breaks 2 ribs and punctures a lung. That's just awful, and our best wishes go out to him in his recovery, and we're going to be sad to not have him for the rest of the season, but this is a lost season anyway. So the Bears defense has been atrocious this year. They're 26th ranked in NFL, 27th in pass, 17th in the run. All of our positive defensive performances that we've had this year, and we've had a few, we can't lie about that. They've relied on the quarterbacks that they're playing against to make mistakes. I'm just going back and looking at notes that I've made on all the games, and it's really true. Is any quarterback that's playing some flawless football is going in there and crushing the Bears. But when you have quarterbacks that have made mistakes against them, the Bears have had good performances. So look at it. Colin Kaepernick didn't play that well. Geno Smith didn't play very well. Matt Ryan had a bad game. Teddy Bridgewater had a bad game. Josh McCown, bad game. So basically, the times that the Bears have had a good defensive performance has been because of the opposing quarterback having a bad game. Was it the Bears forced them into situations that caused them to have bad games? That's up for argument. Some of it, yeah, probably had some defensive pressures. Maybe they threw some looks that confused them, because sometimes that zone defense can be a little confusing. But when you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, you have a quarterback like Tom Brady, and you have a professional offense that's really clicking, what the Bears are throwing against them it just looks like child's play. So when quarterbacks make minimal mistakes, the Bears are pretty much in trouble. When you add in a quarterback that's throwing really accurately and making no mistakes, a la Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, you get some really lopsided scores. Just look at some of the games. You've watched them. So you can't have a successful defense that wins ball games and plays at a championship level if it's all predicated on the fact that the opposing quarterback has to make mistakes. You can't play winning football that way. That's just not how it's done. You have to have a defense that forces every quarterback to play uncomfortable and forces them into mistakes. Green Bay doesn't have the best of defenses, but they schemed well enough against Tom Brady, made Tom Brady uncomfortable enough that his passes, he's normally a really accurate passer, makes him inaccurate. Doesn't have to be really inaccurate, just inaccurate enough to miss a small window. Because windows in the NFL aren't that big, just in general, even on a bad defense. The windows of completing passes isn't huge. But these quarterbacks are so accurate, you end up having hitting right on the money. If you are able to throw that timing off a bit, either through the wide receiver getting bumped at the line of scrimmage, throwing him off from his route, or putting the quarterback under pressure, not letting him step up in the pocket, whatever it may be, is you just create enough of a disruption in the timing of the play to allow your defensive backs to do coverage. But that's not what the Bears are doing, and that's not what you're seeing in most games. But against the Cowboys, this was the first time I saw them all season where they just absolutely got manhandled. Against Green Bay, they got embarrassed. Against New England, they got embarrassed, and they didn't play well, and they didn't get pressure on the quarterback, and there were a lot of blown plays. So, there's a lot of times that they looked bad, but in none of those games did they just get manhandled like they did against the Cowboys. Not too many games that they just got run all over. Sure, they gave up big runs here and there, and they gave up poorly timed runs when they needed to get a stop and gave up a big run. But for the most part, they've been fairly decent against the run. And that that makes sense because they're the 17th ranked run defense, so they're middle of the pack. So this is the first time all season I can think of offhand where I watched them just get dominated, and that's something you just can't have. It makes you think back to last year when everybody ran all over the Bears, and they just couldn't stop it whatsoever. This game, what has been a fairly bright spot on this defense is the defensive line just couldn't get anything going. Jared Allen just was getting swallowed up by the left tackle. Stephen Paya was absent. All the other defensive tackles were swallowed up. The only guy who was able to do anything was Willie Young, who looked pretty well in the game, but just couldn't get to the quarterback. You know, when you're just watching that line or that Cowboys offensive line just manhandle the Bears defense, and then you have DeMarco Murray who's just slicing through. Even when they do seem like they have him bottled up, he's bouncing out and cutting into another hole or cutting back or making a nice juke move, and he's winding up in the secondary before you even know it. So you've got safeties and cornerbacks having to come down and make tackles. When your safeties and your corners have to make tackles on the running back, that's not good. That's not good at all. You just can't have that and end up being a championship level team. You would love to see your defensive tackles make all the stops on the run, but realistically, your linebackers should be coming up. And this is where we have a huge fall off of this defense is bad. Is our linebacking play is just bad. The linebacker play is very poor on this team. You've got some young guys who have some physical gifts and they like things about them. Christian Jones, Jonathan Bostic, and you've got guys who have these physical attributes you like, but they're not putting it together in the full package. Again, you put your former defensive end Shea McClellan as an outside linebacker to utilize his speed and put him in a position every once in a while to rush the passer. But he's not performing out there. He doesn't have these instincts in order to play linebacker at a top-notch level. And I feel like these last few games, they should shift him to middle linebacker to see if you have any value at all going forward. If not, it's time to cut ties with Shea McClellan and admit that you made a mistake on that pick. And I don't know what else to say. He's not going to win out as an outside linebacker. Maybe he has a chance as a middle linebacker because he does have some speed. He does have some size. Maybe he can play that middle linebacker position. And with these last 3 games, what's the hurt in giving him that opportunity? Because otherwise you're going to be left in a guessing game like they have the last few years with Shea McClellan. Can he, with another offseason under his belt, can he become a defensive end? What if he gets stronger? What if he bulks up? And you need to make that switch if you're going to make that switch and make it now. If not, just realize that you've made a mistake and cut those ties. And then you've got Briggs gone for the rest of the year and likely as his career as a Bear. They're not going to re-sign him. They're not going to give him that money. And I think for as much of a guy who his teammates love him, I think he was probably a big pain in the ass for the team this year. His brother, Brian Urlacher, was gone. His coach, Lovie Smith, is gone. And he's very vocal when he's not happy about something. Look at every time he's wanted a new contract. He's thrown temper tantrums in the media. And I'm sure he's a very personable guy. You see him in interviews and things. If he's a guy that you're friends with, he's probably awesome to have around. But if he's a guy that you're the boss of, you're the guy who has to pay him, you're the guy that has to rely on him, he's probably a big pain in the ass. And he's slowly deteriorating as a football player. He's not as fast as he was. He's not as strong as he was. He can't make the plays he used to, and he can't stay on the field and be healthy. So, and he's costing you a ton of money. Goodbye, Lance Briggs. I honestly, if they would have cut him before the season started, I wouldn't have complained. DJ Williams, he's old. He can't play like he did anymore. So what do you have left at linebacker? I mean, you've got Sharpton, who played well enough when they had him in there when there was so many injuries, but he's injured himself, which sucks because you don't get to see what else he can do. You've got Christian Jones, who's a guy you like, and you're giving him an opportunity as an undrafted player, and he's performed above what you would have expected of an undrafted rookie to be playing. He's started some games. He's playing a lot. He's performing well in special teams, but he's an undrafted rookie. You can't expect the world from him. John Bostic is a guy that he has all the physical tools to be able to do that linebacking job, but he's not doing it. He just doesn't have the instincts, and I don't know how to give those instincts to him, and I don't think the coaching staff does either. So, do you give him another year, or do you cut ties with John Bostic? Kasim Green, he's another guy who's just not making it. You spend a fourth round pick on a guy, you expect him to perform for you, and he's not doing that either. So you really don't have a lot in linebackers except for fingers crossed, and I hope. I really think that as much as they need a safety, if they can get a solid middle linebacker in the first round, they've got to pounce all over that. And I've said it before, and I am going to scream it to the high heavens, is if they could get a guy like a Luke Kuechly, that's going to change the way this defense is. You can plug him in. He's going to make the front four better, and he's going to make the back four better, because that just elevates everybody's play. But I'm digressing a little bit. So the loss against the Bears was a manhandling on defense. And you have Tony Romo, who is a pretty accurate quarterback. You've got a dominant wide receiver in Des Bryant, and they're leaving him wide open. And it's just a complete mess on the part of Mel Tucker. And if you're hearing the reports that I'm hearing, is Mel Tucker is gone at the end of the season, which, granted, good, he needs to be gone. But why are they waiting till the end of the season? He's clearly a lame duck coach. He knows he's going to get fired. Everybody knows he's going to get fired. So why are they keeping him? What do they expect to get out of him? His defensive schemes don't seem to make sense. Even after seeing what his flaws are, watching film, watching the whole first half of a game where his defensive strategies aren't working, why is he not willing to make any sort of changes? I mean, it's very evident of being a fan and watching game film. I can see what it is that it takes to stop these high-powered offenses. Is you have to be physical at the line of scrimmage with their wide receivers, throw them off of the timing patterns. Don't let them have free runs, because when you give a wide receiver that's talented a free start, you've already lost that battle unless you can quickly get to that quarterback. You need to be physical at the line of scrimmage. The Bears aren't. They're letting guys get free breaks off the line of scrimmage. They're not getting the pressure on the quarterback. And that happens sometimes with your front four. You're not going to get dominating pressure. And they've gotten good pressure from their front four. They need to send more blitzes. And when they do send blitzes, you probably heard me scream, they're going straight into the same gaps every time with a linebacker. And if you watch winning teams, you don't know where they're coming from. They're going to send exotic blitzes. They're going to change up their game plan for you. They see where your weak link is, and they're going to exploit your weak link. The Bears, it seems like they're not watching game film on the other team. If they are watching game film, I don't know what they're seeing that like how they're missing what I'm seeing. So Mel Tucker, his schemes and his understanding of what they need to do and how to stop other teams is just god awful. He's lacking physicality anywhere. It's just not what the Bears need, and he's got to go. And I don't understand why they don't just get rid of him now and see what you have in house. What can you do without Mel Tucker there botching things up? But he's apparently gone. Let's see. Again, too many miscommunications on defense. Players aren't communicating with each other. You've got a player like you've got Kyle Fuller out there and Brock Vereen out there. You've got two rookies, and they're playing in the zone. When a wide receiver is breaking off, they're not communicating with each other. Who's got who's breaking off, who's covering the open guy, and if everybody shifts, who's going to cover the new open guy. There's not communicating in the defensive backfield. So whereas a zone defense can work, there's things you have to do within that zone to make it work. You can't have poor communication. You can't have the defense know exactly where the weak spots are and you not being aware of where the weak spots are. You have to you have to know what they're going to do before they do it. You have to understand your defense enough to know where the weaknesses are and how to best defend against the weaknesses. And if they start taking advantage of things, you have to be able to respond. There's too many miscommunications, and professional offenses are taking advantage. You've got too many linebackers running around just looking bewildered. Cough, John Bostic and Shane McClellan. Sometimes they're just running out there, and you're like, "What the hell are you two doing?" It's just like a skit. I mean, Mel Tucker doesn't deserve to finish this season. You've got the Saints and the Lions coming up. We already saw what the Lions can do against them. And the Saints are a team that's fighting for a playoff spot. They're going to be playing them on Monday night, this coming Monday night, next football week. And I don't really want to see what a fired up Saints offense on Monday Night Football, where they're fighting for playoff life, is going to do against the Bears with that terrible defense. I know I sound like a hypocrite because if you listen to the show, I said that I think the Bears can beat the Saints. And I don't know what I was thinking because they're not going to make life uncomfortable enough for Drew Brees to throw bad passes, and they're not going to be able to cover those receivers. So I don't know what they're going to do to stop them, and they already showed they can't stop the Lions. So am I crazy to think that the Bears won't beat either one of those teams? I don't think so. And the Vikings are bad. I think they'll beat the Vikings. So in the next 3 games, realistically, they're going to go 1-3 or 1-2. I'm sorry, in the next 3. That's bad. That's really a step back from where they were. Last year, they were a team that had a really good offense and a really bad defense. And they went through to try to correct that defense. And granted, the run defense has improved a lot. The defense as a whole has not improved. And the offense has way regressed. And the special teams have really regressed. So you're totally regressing as an organization. And you can't use Mel Tucker as the scapegoat for this whole team, but he's an important cog that has to go. So he's not a scapegoat. He's just one huge part of the problem that you have to fix. The special teams, I don't even want to comment on them. They're just a joke. You can't block for your punter. You have Perry that runs down there and on a really good kick, and he doesn't even know the rules of what he's supposed to do. He runs out of bounds. He sees that nobody's going to go for this punt, and he can't just let it die on its own because nobody else is touching it, and he runs over there from out of bounds and touches it. That's a stupid, idiot, bonehead play. Not even going to sugarcoat it. Is Joe DeCamillis should have run out on the field and jerked him off by his face mask and not let him play anymore. That was such a boneheaded play. If you're a special teams coach, your players can't behave like that. There's so many penalties on this special teams. There's so many boneheaded plays. It's a joke. I don't understand it at all. You have a terrible net punting average. You're missing too many field goals. You have absolutely no return game. Joe DeCamillis, he's got to go as well. Is he the whole reason that this team is bad? Nope. But is he part of the problem and not part of the solution? Yep. Now on to the offense. This game pretty much exemplifies my criticism of Mark Trestman. If you're a guy that listens to the show, or girl, or man, woman, child, dog, whatever, if you listen to my show, you know what my criticism of Mark Trestman is. And I was discussing it with Lester from Windy City Gridiron before. I think the play calling power has, on a day-to-day basis, in an in-game basis, needs to be taken away from Mark Trestman. This game was a lot of poor play calling until the game was out of hand, and suddenly he just comes on and this team starts firing on all cylinders again. I think what's been a quiet criticism all along of Mark Trestman, and is something I've been saying as well, is you have a guy who is able to see how an offense is supposed to run. He's able to implement it, but when it comes time to the game decisions, he's not calling the right plays. He's not calling the plays to put the offense in the right position. And as things stop working, he suddenly closes up in a shell, and he starts lacking confidence, and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy where he just collapses and the whole thing crumbles and the offense struggles. But then once it's out of hand, he just looks at it and goes, well, screw it. What worse can happen? And then he starts opening things up again. They start succeeding. It's really frustrating, and I don't think he's not an offensive mind. He's a really good offensive mind. I think, though, that on the in-game level, he needs to take a step back and let the offensive coordinator call the plays in-game and worry about what adjustments need to be made. Go out there and not have to actually be in the trenches when the game is going on. Take a step back and go, all right, what am I seeing? And look at the bigger picture. All right, I see that they're doing this to stop us from doing, these plays we want to do. What can we do? Let him take the bigger picture of it rather than the grunt work of calling the actual plays. Leave that to somebody else. So it's just his play calling just was not bad. You also have a situation where it's clear that the quarterback is not trusting in the system. So you have a quarterback not trusting in the system. The quarterback is not playing particularly well. And also that system is failing the quarterback. Is when that system should be get the ball out quick, get it to a receiver, move the chains, make him feel comfortable. And what you have is wide receivers running these terrible routes where they're not, he's got to make, people aren't getting open. He's got to make spectacular plays in order to keep the chains moving. And then when those things break down and you're not able to get the first downs because you got guys that are covered, people are dropping passes, whatnot, or you're getting sacked or chased out of the pocket, have to throw the ball away. You get frustrated, and then suddenly that gunslinger, I'm not even going to use the word, I hate when they use the G word, but he goes out there and he plays like he knows how to play, and he's going to force the ball to receivers he's comfortable with, and that's when you start getting really bad play out of Jay Cutler. So this is kind of like a spiraling downward where the system fails the quarterback goes outside the system and fails on his own, making the system get even tighter, which makes him go outside of it more. And And you have a quarterback who's already doesn't like coaches. He's like the Allen Iverson of the NBA or the NFL. And you're going to break that trust with him, and you're stuck with him for several years unless you can trade him miraculously. But you have to make this system work, and you have to make it work with him. You have to do things that allow him to succeed. And I think part of that is letting Aaron Cromer make the play calls week to week or game to game. You also have the offensive line. They suck. They last year were a fairly good offensive line. Partly due to injury, partly due to rotating players, whatever, they're not playing well this year. You have guys that are frustrated and losing one-on-one matchups. It doesn't help that your best offensive lineman, arguably, Matt Slauson, is out for the year. Garza is about at the end of his career. And you have Jordan Mills, who was a weak link anyway, and he's playing on a bum ankle. It's just a recipe for disaster, and they're losing matchups like crazy, and you're seeing a ton of pressure on Jay Cutler that they didn't have last year. Running back, Matt Forte, I think, is great, but he's really underutilized. Partly is because the Bears have no confidence that offensive line is going to open up holes for him to run, and B, they're just beating him up on the swing pass. And I'm a firm believer that short passing game can imitate the run and get the same effect for it, but not when you overuse it. You have to be smart about it. You can't be predictable in this league because people will then predict you. It's hard enough to be a professional offense in the NFL, but when you don't have the ability to just completely dominate them like the Cowboys do with that offensive line, when you've got that road grader offensive line, you can do things like be predictable because they physically can't stop your offensive line from dominating. So the Bears need to do things like keep people guessing, keep everything off balance. Don't let them impose their will on you. Switch things up. But instead what they have is they have a predictable swing pass game with Matt Forte, and they're running these same patterns over and over and over for the wide receivers, and they're just allowing it just opens the door for physical play and not allowing the wide receiver to get separation. So Jay Cutler has to throw it away, force it into coverage, roll out, get sacked. It's bad news all around. The wide receivers, they have no opportunity to run plays to get themselves open. There's a lot of curls. There's a lot of stop routes. They're not doing the things to get them open, and they're not splitting the safeties. They're not allowing these wide receivers to get open, and that's the fault of play calling. And I don't think the foundation that the offense is built on is broken per se. We've already seen that this offense can work in the league. We saw it last year. But I think that there's a lot of things that are currently wrong on a good foundation. So I don't think that there's a need to scrap everything on this offense and blow it all up. I don't think that's the case. I think there's just a lot of tweaks that can be done. First and foremost is let Mark Trestman be a head coach. Let Aaron Cromer be your offensive coordinator. Let him make the play calls in play-by-play within the game. Then vary up your offense. Shore up that offensive line, first of all. Shore up that offensive line. Spend some money on offensive linemen. Get that completely shored up. Protect your quarterback. Get Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey out there and give them routes that let them get open. Allow them to go deep. I mean, when you give him time, and Alshon Jeffrey is getting open deep, but the quarterback's not having time to throw, or you're running him on too many of these stop routes where they have the defensive back hanging over his back, draped all over him. So give these wide receivers opportunity to get open and use their talent. Vary it up. Don't keep working the same guy every time. Is like you'll have one guy who's getting a lion's share of the catches that game. Last game, Martellus Bennett was catching everything. Vary it up. Like use your weapons to keep that defense off balance. Don't let them know where you're coming from. Is line up Matt Forte in the slot, or use the misdirection type plays with Matt Forte to keep that defense guessing. Don't give up on the run game at all. I mean, even if you're using the swing passes, don't give up on the actual run game. Let him run some passes. Do some draw plays, and don't be predictable. Let your wide receivers go, and then let them go deep. Dump it off underneath, and let your tight end run that way. That's something that the other teams are doing to the Bears. Is when the defensive line's not getting pressure, you have the defenses spreading out the wide receivers spreading out the defensive backs. Then they're dumping it underneath and utilizing the fact that the Bears linebackers are terrible, and then they're getting these big chunks of yards underneath. Whereas in previous years, you would have Lance Briggs in his prime and Brian Urlacher in his prime, and they're coming down and they're either defending those plays or keeping them to minimal gains. But this defense can't do that, and you have to exploit that on other teams. Is stretch out their defensive backs, dump it off underneath, let Martellus Bennett have a one-on-one with a linebacker, lead him with the pass. Work on accuracy and timing with Jay Cutler. Is lead Martellus Bennett on those underneaths. Lead Matt Forte. Let him get out there and have a one-on-one. And when he breaks something, you're picking up 10, 15 yards. Keep doing that. Just keep varying up how you do things so the defense doesn't know what to expect or how to cover it. So the offense needs it's not like fine-tuning. I'm not going to call it that. It needs some complete big tunes, but the foundation, I think, is there. So, if the rumblings I hear are correct, is that Mark Trestman's going to keep his job and Joe DeCamillis and Mel Tucker are gone. I don't know what to say. Honestly, I think everybody should go, but, at least those two big puzzle pieces are gone. But everybody needs to be on a short leash after this, because you can't be in the NFL and keep losing season after season, not making the playoffs, not competing for a Super Bowl, and keep your job. So that's really all I have to say about the Bears. I want to transition over. We haven't talked a lot about the Bulls this season, partly because it's the NFL still. I watch a lot of the NFL, and I'm a huge Blackhawks guy, so I'm watching all the Blackhawks games, and I have a wife and a new baby, so I watch bits and pieces of the Bulls game in between commercials, and I DVR them, and then go back and fast forward, a little bit through it, and it won't be until the Bears season's over that I get to really jump in and catch a lot more games. So I have been neglecting Bulls, but I would like to have my friends from Bow come on and talk some Bulls with us. But I was talking with those guys, and I made the bold prediction on their show that the Bulls are going to win 60 games this season. 60 games. I said 60 games for the Bulls out of my mouth. Why did I say that? Well, this team is pretty deep. They've got a really deep team. Derrick Rose back healthy, much better bench. You still have Thibodeau as your coach. You had a team that competed last year, and without Derrick Rose, without that deep talent, and they still competed. So what makes me think that was going to change? But this team has really struggled, and they're still a clearly much more talented team than a lot of teams in NBA, especially in the Eastern Conference. So they're winning a lot of games still, but they're not winning games like they should. They're not playing like they should. It's just not materializing like it was supposed to. So where is this Tom Thibodeau D and this Tom Thibodeau hustle? Where's the rebounding? And this team is not hustling like they should. It seems like they're a little bit lost in a haze. The defense has just been lacking, and like I said, they're not getting to those rebounds. Like they're giving up way too many offensive rebounds, and I know I sound like a broken record on this, but it's true. They're giving up way too many offensive rebounds. They're not rebounding themselves. I mean, look at the Warriors game, which is the last game the Bulls played. Let's look at that defense. They allowed the Golden State Warriors to get 30 3-point shots off. 30. That's a lot. And Golden State hit 12 of them. They only forced 11 turnovers the whole game against the Warriors. And they allowed 100 points or more in 6 of their last 9 games. What's happening? They're allowing these open looks. They're allowing deep passes into the paint. They have poor defensive communication. It's just that these guys aren't meshing yet. And I don't know how to fix that other than keep playing games and practicing and keeping guys healthy, because it's hard to mesh when everybody's coming in and out of injury. You can say the Bulls have been ravaged by injuries. They've had 7 players that have missed at least 2 games already this season, but they were essentially healthy against Golden State. I mean, Joe has an ankle and Taj has a little bit of an ankle, but everybody was on the court. Everybody was playing. Everybody was active or available to play. So you just have these guys that aren't communicating on the floor. They're frustrated. They see what's happening, and everybody kind of sees what's happening as far as their defense, but they're just not sure how to stop it. So, I mean, right now they're 2-5 at the United Center, and when you're 2-5 at home, and you're a team that a lot of experts predicted to go on to be in the NBA Finals and win the Eastern Conference, or at bare minimum play in the Eastern Conference Final, is you get a lot of frustration. It's inevitable. I mean, NBA is all sports are basically a lot of passion and emotion and energy flowing through you, but basketball, you're leaving that a lot of that out there, and you've got some fiery guys and emotional guys on this team like Joakim Noah, and you've got some new talent on there. So it's hard to mesh when results aren't going your way. It's hard to mesh when you're losing. It's hard to mesh when not everybody's on the same page, and you're seeing that on the floor. This defense isn't playing anything like Bulls defenses of the past several years. And I think that all the tools are in place for them to be a much better defensive team. But they've got to keep their guys healthy, and they've got to practice and play together and get that down. They're also struggling on offense. And sure, they've put up a couple 100-point games, but they haven't really done that in recent years, but this is a team that has a lot more offensive firepower than they had the last several years. But the reasons for offensive struggles is, like, look at Golden State game. They had over 20 turnovers. They got 21 3-point shots off, but only hit 7. They're floundering on the offense when they really need a big score. Part of the problem there is the penetration. Is they're not penetrating to get open looks on 3. They're getting poor penetration and kicking it out, and still having guys that that have somebody in their face. They're not hitting those 3-point shots, which is making it less effective with their penetration, because you're going to guard that because they're not hitting shots, and it's a bad cycle that goes through. This team is not shooting good enough to help create more penetration, and they've got guys that aren't penetrating to the lane and creating open shots for their 3-point shooters. So that's a huge chunk of it. You also have Derrick Rose, who, although he's played in 7 straight games now, and this is mind blown that we're excited about Derrick Rose playing in 7 straight games, but he's not in the MVP type form. Against Golden State, he didn't score in the second quarter, didn't score in the third quarter, didn't score in the fourth quarter. I think he was like 2 of 11 for shooting for that game. So he doesn't look like the same guy, and in fact, he's kind of hurting the offense because his shot isn't there, and he's not following through when he's penetrating to the lane. So he's not following through, and he's not getting hacked. So he's going to the line. He's just missing the shot, and you wind up with a lost possession, or he's pulling up for jumpers and not hitting them. So he's really part of the offensive problem as well. You know, the sad part about it is the Eastern Conference is just so weak that even when the Bulls aren't playing well, they're going to wind up in the playoffs going into the Eastern Conference. But the big issue is, you know, it doesn't matter if you're making the playoffs, is you're put together to win a championship. And why set yourself up for a harder matchup in the first round? Right now, they'd be playing Cleveland in the first round if the playoffs were to start today. And, you know, Cleveland's is not the San Antonio Spurs. They're not the Golden State Warriors. But Cleveland has won, I believe, 6 games in a row or 7 games in a row. And they're starting to finally click. And they've got a lot of top-end talent. They've got the best player in the league. And they're in first place in your division. So, and they've already beaten you once this season. They're 1-0 against you. So why set yourself up to play a harder matchup in the first round? I mean, wouldn't you rather be in position to play Milwaukee Bucks or the Brooklyn Nets or the Miami Heat in the first round? I know I would. And so part of that is you get rewarded for playing well in the regular season, that you get to play the scrub teams in the playoffs, or at least in the first round. So a lot of these things have to start clicking, and you know, Tibbs can't be happy, and Joakim Noah, I'm surprised that he's not more vocal about the frustrations that they're having. So, you know, I think with this team, it's going to be predicated on them shoring up that defense. Is we all know they have a lot of 3-point shooters. They've got a lot of guys that can score, even, you know, Mirotic and Pau Gasol, and Jimmy Butler is becoming an offensive threat, and Mike Dunleavy. You've got guys that can score, so that's just sort of going to correct itself, I think. But this defense doesn't have a ton of one-on-one spectacular defensive players. You don't have a guy like LeBron James who can just go down and shut somebody down. I mean, the best you have is Jimmy Butler, who's a very good defender, and you've got Taj Gibson, who's a very good defender, and then you've got a lot of guys who are good system defenders. But part of being a system defender is that system has to be seamlessly going. It's got to be a finely tuned engine. You need to have better communication with guys. You need to stop those passes deep into the paint. You can't give guys open looks, especially guys that are known to just knock down 3-pointers. You can't leave them open. That's what you really got to watch for is can, now that everybody's healthy, going forward, can we capitalize on that health to get everybody on the same page of what they're expecting on the defense? That's about it for the Bulls. It's still a long season to go, but they've really got to start ratcheting that up, because if you get too far in the season and you still have these frustrations on your end, then you're going to sort of start losing people, and as far as their attitudes and their willingness to play. We'll see how Thibodeau handles this, but I believe it's probably going to be with a lot of hoarse screaming, and we'll see. The last thing I want to talk about is our beloved Chicago Blackhawks. The Blackhawks right now are in a completely different place than when I talked about them in the last show. The last show, I said they were right on the bubble of being able to make the playoffs, and even if they make the playoffs, that you don't want to have what you had in like 2011, where they expended so much energy just to make the playoffs that they didn't make it past the first round because they were running on empty tanks. I said that even though this is a long season, you don't want to fall too many points behind the leaders in your division and your conference. So what do the Blackhawks do? They go out and just completely dominate in a West Coast circus trip. And then they follow up with bringing it back home and winning at home as well. They've moved from being the 7th seed or the 8th seed to being first in the division. It's just a completely different story that a week makes. So they've won 6 in a row, and it's not just 6 games against scrubs. Is they went to LA and beat the defending Stanley Cup champion Kings, and then they came back home and they beat Nashville, they beat St. Louis to leapfrog both those teams to be in first place. And if you look at the goals against average, showing how stingy the defenses are, is 4 of the top 5 defenses in the NHL are in the Blackhawks division. It's the Blackhawks, it's Nashville, it's St. Louis, and it's Winnipeg. And if you throw Minnesota in there, then that's 5 of the top 9 are in their division. So it's a very tough division that these guys are going in, and the Blackhawks are just on a roll right now. Crawford was just playing phenomenally in net. I mean, he had to have been, if he comes back from his injury and he's playing at that same level for the rest of the season, he's got to be considered for the Vezina Trophy. I mean, he's got to be considered one of those top goalies because he's just playing so well. Night after night, he's playing really well. You've got that new line or semi-new line of Brad Richards, Christopher Stieg, and Patrick Kane, and that line is cooking. I know a lot of times Coach Quenneville goes in there and tinkers with lines and tinker, and then eventually somebody scores, and everybody assumes, oh man, Coach Q, he really did those line switches. He's like a miracle worker, and really it's just kind of a coincidence. But I think this line was put together really smart, and it's playing really well. I know in the offseason I wasn't very happy about them not being able to get rid of Christopher Stieg, but it shows that having a whole offseason to work out when you're healthy versus recovering from an injury really changes the way that you play during that season. Also having the whole offseason to skate with your new teammates, new/old teammates. So that line is just really crushing it. And then, you've got Dan Carcillo, who, is not my favorite player, but he's really come in there and provided some energy for the bottom lines. And he's putting pucks on net. He's playing aggressive, and you've got it's been really nice because he's provided that spark for the third and fourth lines to keep those guys playing well. You got Brandon Saad who's playing well, but there's some big butts in here. And, I like big butts. I cannot lie. Corey Crawford did something stupid. Went to a concert. I believe it was Rise Against, and he fell down the stairs. He's going to he hurt his leg. He's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks. So as much as I like Antti Raanta, is having Antti Raanta and Scott Darling be your goalie for 2 to 3 weeks is a little bit scary. And you have to make sure your defense is playing tough in front of you, and everybody's playing defensive-minded because you want to make sure that you give those goalies the best chance to win. And so far, so good. There's been 2 games without Crawford. Antti Raanta was in goal against St. Louis and played really well. And Scott Darling was put in goal against Nashville, and he played really well as well. I'm not going to lie, I haven't seen the Nashville game yet. I was out with my family. I have it on my DVR, and that's what I'm going to be watching as soon as while this podcast uploads. But 1 game each, both have played really well. So, knock on wood, that's we can continue the solid goalie play until Crawford comes back. but it's nice to have that cushion of being in first place for those couple weeks, because if you do falter and you do have some struggle in goalie play, is you can buy yourself enough time till he comes back that you don't fall in a hole. Another thing that's, I guess this one is a good problem to have. You got Patrick Sharps coming back. So where's he going to fit in? That's the big question, is because you've got all of these lines are clicking pretty well. You've got the Taves line with Saad and Hossa. They're playing well. Does Sharp come in there and displace Brandon Saad? And then if so, where do you put Brandon Saad? You're not going to change up that second line because it's playing so well. Do you put him on the third line? And if so, who do you displace? Bickle? Or do you move him to the fourth line and send Nordstrom back down to Rockford? I don't know. I mean, all of these lines are playing pretty well, and then you have Sharp, who's been consistently one of if not your top scoring forward for the last several years. How do you not put him back in the lineup? So Coach Q's got some choices to make. But I really like how these lines have been playing lately, and I like the new attitude that Joakim Nordstrom has brought to this team. Last year he was very passive when he did get into play. I think he's a talented guy, but he was just playing so passive. And he's just playing like a much more aggressive player now, and he was just physicality, and he seems much more comfortable playing in the bigs than he did before. And I don't know if that was just to the experience he got in Chicago last year, and then being able to play some in Rockford in the beginning of the season. But it's nice to see. And then you've got the one that's much more concerning to me is that musical third defensive pairing is, since TVR is out for a long time, that he had that fifth defenseman spot just locked up. So your first two pairings are Seabrook and Keith, and the second one Oduya and Hjalmarsson. And then that third pairing was always TVR every game until he got hurt, and then mostly Roosevelt, but then David Rundblad would get a few shots in there every now and then. But that was, you had a very steady rotation in the third defensive pairings. But with TVR out, there's a little to be desired. Is clearly the organization and Coach Q and anybody who watches hockey knows Rundblad is he's not the guy that you want to be in there long term. And Roosevelt has been playing much, much better than he did in the playoffs last year. But still, I think there's better options. The Blackhawks brought up Adam Clendenning, who's one of the Rockford defenders, one of the young guys, and he's by far the best offensive defenseman that Rockford has. And he came in and he played, I think, 5 games. He had 2 pretty solid games, and then he started tapering off and showing some rookie inexperience. They ended up sending him down, and then they called up Klaus Dahlbeck. And if you've listened to this show, we had Klaus on a couple weeks ago, and he's just a really hard worker. He's always one of the hardest working guys there, always working on his craft. Really, really tough defensive player. I like him a lot. He's improved his offensive game a lot since last season. Love Klaus Dahlbeck. I'm excited for him to come up, and he finally got his first chance to play yesterday against Nashville. So I'm excited tonight after I upload this to watch that game and see how he played. But in reality, Coach Q has been, rather than trusting some of the Rockford guys, have been calling on Roosevelt and Rundblad to be his go-to guys. And that's a little bit frustrating, and sure, there's been not a ton of huge gaffes out there, but the two of them make enough cringeworthy plays while they're out there that you don't want to tempt fate for too long. And I really think that the end game going forward is you've got to get some of these guys from Rockford onto the big squad and get them playing time. Partly because you don't want to have to rely on David Rundblatt if something happens. And secondly is Oduya is not going to be with the team next year. Roosevelt is probably not going to be with the team next year. So you need to get these guys the experience they need because you're going to have big shifts in your pairings. You're going to have to readjust. Do you put Seabrook? Do you try to mask somebody by putting Keith with one of the younger guys? Or do you keep that top pairing of Seabrook and Keith? What do you do? Who do you pair Hjalmarsson with? Then does TVR move up and play with one of the top two lines? So you've got some things to figure out, and I think there's quite a bit of talent. I think as far as the Blackhawks minor league system goes, Rockford has a lot of defensive player talent, and I think all of you should actually go out and see Rockford Ice Hogs games because A, you're seeing your future Blackhawk players, and B, it's an absolute blast to go. They create a really good environment there. They've got a ton of defensemen there and a lot of talent, so much so that you got guys that aren't even dressing for nights or on the active roster for the Knights because they've got so many defensemen that are talented. So you got to start working those guys in and giving them the time and really building their experience level to the point where next season when you have to rely on them instead of being able to have the luxury of slowly working them in, that they can step right in day one and you're not losing out on anything. But it's up to Coach Q, and he's kind of a stubborn guy. So, but that's what I'm looking for is getting these guys some experience and like slowly putting the baby in the bath rather than just dumping them right in, and letting these guys work their way in slowly and giving them the experience. And hopefully, my guy Klaus Dahlbeck can stick it out and keep playing well. I really think that's going to wrap it up for this episode. I've kind of rambled on enough. I want to start doing some more about the White Sox and Cubs, but realistically, it's just a lot of minimal moves and rumors and speculation and guessing games at this point. So I kind of want to wait till the winter meetings heat up in the next couple weeks and see some players sign and kind of see when it becomes much more educated speculations and you get some players signing under your belts, and we'll bring in some experts to discuss it with us. But so that's going to wrap it up for this show, and thanks for checking us out. Make sure you're hitting subscribe on iTunes and Stitcher, or however you're listening to the show. Check out Swerskisports.com. We're going to have some giveaways coming up, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter, facebook.com/Swerskisports and at Swerski Sports on Twitter. And thanks for listening. Till next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears. Oh, when the Bears go bearing down, I wanna